Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today, I'm going to be reading the message that Mauricio Quintero has written on our portion Tavo. He's entitled it called The Purpose of Life. The first quote is from Jeremiah 3, verse 18. At that time, they will call Jerusalem the throne of God, and all the nations will gather there in Jerusalem in the name of God. They will not follow the desires of their evil heart. This week, our parasha is Tavo, which means when you come. And the main themes of this portion consist of God's instructions to Israel, revealing their purpose or occupation once they enter and take possession of the land. Now, the first theme is the offering of the first fruits, called the bikurim. It's beautiful to see that one of the central themes of the Torah is that the production of the land requires a series of activities implying human effort, such as cultivating the land, working it to select the best produce, and finally going to the place that the Eternal chooses, Jerusalem, to make a declaration of gratitude for what the Eternal has done for us. Second, the portion speaks about the tithes for the Levites and for the poor. Third, it speaks about how the blessings and curses should be proclaimed on Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, which are connected to Parashat Re'eh. Moses appears on the scene, reminding Israel of their identity, that they are God's chosen people, and that they, Israel, have also chosen the Eternal. Fourth, the part containing the tochecha, the rebukes, lists the blessings first. This is followed by the consequences of not obeying the Torah's commandments. These are manifested by illness, hunger, poverty, pain, human suffering, and exile while we're alive. It concludes by declaring that after 40 years, Israel had achieved a heart to know, eyes to hear, and eyes to see and ears to hear. I'd like to focus on the first part of the portion concerning the Bikurim, the agricultural offering that they were to bring to the place that the Lord would choose. This offering, according to our sages, referred to the fruits of the earth mentioned in Deuteronomy 8, verses 7 to 8, where it says, "For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, Eretz Tovah, a land of streams, of fountains, and deep springs that issue from its hills and from its mountains, a land of wheat and barley, vines, fig trees, and pomegranates, a land yielding oil and honey." However, I think the Torah is broader in its meaning, and in my understanding, all the fruit of the ground, kol pri hadama. They go beyond the limits of these 7 types of harvest that we just read in Deuteronomy 8. From this, we can draw the first lesson. If we are to limit anything, let it not be gratitude. In gratitude, there's no ceiling, and there is no, that's enough. Gratitude is a spiritual and emotional expression that must be physically manifested in this world, must be visible, palpable, and perceptible through smell, sound, or sight. There's no gratitude that remains solely within oneself. When giving thanks, it must be public and perceived not only by the one who receives the gratitude, but by everyone around. In this sense, giving thanks is a voluntary act with intent and purpose. Now, why do we bring physical things to God? Does God eat? Does he have human needs? Why not give to the poor, the widow, the orphan? I think that's why later it speaks about presenting the tithes to the Levites and to the poor to distinguish that what is for God is not for men, and that one does not preclude the other. The second lesson, when receiving something from the Eternal, We should not sit back and do nothing. It's very clear that human effort in the form of work must be part of the blessing. Today, the world believes that blessing means receiving money and fame for free without deserving it, which can be good, but it is superfluous and vain. However, the value of work and effort together with discipline is a pillar of the Torah. And in fact, feeling useful is one of the major purposes of life. Devarim says that when God gives us the inheritance of the land, we will have to follow certain orders, such as possessing it, that is, ridding it of its former tenants, living in it, like building houses, taking the first fruits, choosing them, gathering the first fruits of the land, putting them in a basket, and traveling, going to the place that the Eternal chooses, Jerusalem, to make a declaration. All of these verbs in chapter 26 require certain ingredients: willpower, movement, and effort. There's a saying in our nation, what costs little is little appreciated. For this reason, God blesses us through our efforts so that we can appreciate what he gives us. In my country and in all of Latin America, the worst evil that we have suffered for a long time is welfare. That is, we have become accustomed to thinking that we need subsidies and aid from local or foreign governments to get ahead. This type of thinking has destroyed our nations because it does not motivate people to go out day after day to earn their daily bread, to reinvent themselves, to look for opportunities, to think and to work for themselves. Israel never received welfare. Rather, the founders of the nation worked hard to get water and food, and this effort allowed them to develop in areas that they never imagined, to the point that today, in the middle of the desert, Israel is self-sufficient in gaining water, energy, food, technology, medicine, etc. So every time, anytime things get difficult for you, anytime you feel tired and harassed because things are not easy, be grateful, be thankful. It's for your own good. I tell my children, cook, make your bed, do your homework, move, learn this, learn that, etc. It's because I want to put the DNA of effort and discipline into them. The third lesson: why does God omit the name of Jerusalem in the Torah? Where do we get that Jerusalem is the place that God has chosen for us to dwell? Psalm 76:2 says, Shalem became his dwelling place, and Zion his shelter. Psalm 132 verse 13 says, For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it as his throne. 2 Chronicles 6:7 says, But then I chose Jerusalem for my name to dwell there, and I chose David to rule over my people Israel. There is no doubt that the place where God chose to erect a physical dwelling in those times was Jerusalem. Rabbi Maimonides explains that the Torah does not clearly mention this in order to prevent other nations from fighting to occupy it, thus making it difficult for the Jews to establish themselves there. This leads me to think that the Torah protects us at all times, even by not clearly revealing certain things. We must act in the same way. We must not reveal everything we know to everyone, since we do not know their real intentions. We must not rush to see God's promises fulfilled in our times. This is important because this is something that I personally have experienced this week. We must not rush or hurry to see God's promises fulfilled in our time. Do you know how much time passed between the revelation that God would have a place to live and the construction of the first temple? Approximately 480 years. That's to say, we often receive words from the eternal through people, or we believe in the words of the Torah and make them our own, but we really must not lose heart when time passes and we do not see fulfilled what the eternal has told us. Abraham was told that he would be a great nation, but between that divine revelation and the exodus from Egypt, we see Israel for the first time developing as a nation. 720 years had passed. The fourth lesson, in the Mishnah, in Tractate Masechet Bikurim, it explains how the first fruits were transported to the temple in Jerusalem. It says, all the villagers of the region would gather in the main village and sleep in the streets. In the morning, they would call out to the leader, saying, "Come, we will go up to Zion, to the house of our God." Then the group would set out. Before them went an ox. Its horns were covered with gold, and its head adorned with an olive garland. And before them went the men who played the flutes and showed them the way to Jerusalem. When they arrived at the holy city, each man would decorate his basket with his first fruits, and the high dignitaries would come out to meet them and say, "Welcome, brothers." The flutes led them to the temple, and there each one carried his first fruits on his shoulder and placed them before the altar, pronouncing the words of chapter 26, verse 5 to the middle of verse 10. Even the king had to carry his first fruits like every other Jew. When we read the interpretation of this beautiful ceremony and procedure, it is beautiful. The sages say this offering meant the recognition of the divine order in nature and the existence of the Supreme Being to whom the first fruits were consecrated as a sign of gratitude. The horns of the ox were covered with gold, which meant that work leads the people to prosperity, and only prosperity based on work has value, is true. The ox carried on its head the branch of the olive tree. The olive tree is the symbol of the light of wisdom and science. That is, that prosperity should lead us only to fictitious material progress, not only, but to a true advance in the order of the Spirit. I found this description so beautiful because it agrees with what I spoke about earlier. We are grateful for who we recognize. The value of work leads us to prosperity, but work without wisdom and knowledge is in vain. Because what's the use of gaining the whole world if we do not cultivate the soul? I love the idea that before the ox, there were flute players playing the flute to direct the people on the road to Jerusalem. That is, their final resting place was Jerusalem. This picture is a summary of each life that God has placed on earth, in which with little effort, knowledge, and wisdom, we will achieve prosperity. But this is not our goal. Our goal is to go to Jerusalem. So what would it mean to go up to Jerusalem? Jerusalem, according to Bereshit, began as the city of Salem, the root of the word being shalom, peace. And this was the place where a king with the title Melchizedek, king of justice, reigned, and who, according to tradition, was Shem, Noah's son. Then it appears for the first time in the Tanakh with the name of Jerusalem in the book of Joshua, chapter 10, relating that a king with the title Adoni Tzedek, the Lord of Justice, reigned in that place. However, this apparently good king was a king whom God decided to destroy. And in this episode, the miracle occurs where the sun and the moon stop, and where it says, because God fought for Israel. Neither before nor after has there been a day like this in which God acted according to the word spoken by someone else, in this case, Joshua. Etymologically, according to the Jewish Encyclopedia and other scholars, we are taught that there are many meanings to the word Jerusalem, such as abode of peace, abode founded on security, foundation of peace, possession of peace, Yireh Shalom, house of peace, Yerushalem, seeing peace, Yirah Shalem. So where am I going with all this? A very simple teaching is that Jerusalem is not just a physical place on earth, widely recognized as the capital of the state of Israel, or part of a phrase that we recite on Rosh Hashanah next year in Jerusalem. There's so much more to it than that. Rabbi Shaul teaches us that there is a spiritual Jerusalem that comes from above, from God, as we read in the book of Galatians. In fact, the idea of building a temple was that it would be a point of connection between Hashemayim, the heavens, where God dwells, and earth, where the presence of the One would manifest itself. And then Yochanan, describes a vision recounted in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, where he sees a renewed world, a renewed earth, and Jerusalem to celebrate the wedding, the marriage between the Eternal and his people, which is the revelation of Sinai. We can spend our lives working, achieving many triumphs, making a name for ourselves, acquiring wisdom and knowledge, spreading the seed of gratitude and honoring God with our offerings. But all these are temporary. Goal is to stand before making a declaration in the place of our final dwelling. Let me repeat that. We can spend our lives working, achieving triumphs, making a name for ourselves, acquiring wisdom and knowledge, spreading the seed of gratitude and honoring God with our offerings. But all these are temporary. Our goal is to stand before making a declaration in the place of our final dwelling, in the presence of the Most High, in the place, as we read in the beginning, where all nations will gather before the divine throne to worship, to honor, and not live according to a deceitful heart, but with a renewed heart. We can live in the state of shalom, yes, in a state of peace, where I continue to dwell safely under the shadow of the Most High. My prayer for this Shabbat is that we find the path to our eternal Jerusalem, that we can recognize that we could not have existed if we had obeyed the voice of that Aramean who wanted to destroy us, and that what we are and have achieved as fruit until today is thanks to the good hand of the Eternal. Shabbat Shalom.